It's quite something when you see it, isn't it? That level of dedication. People camping out for days for a new phone or, getting these huge tattoos of their favorite singer. Some brands almost feel sacred.
They really do.
So today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, the psychology behind this really intense devotion to celebrities, to brands, what people often just call fanaticism.
Yeah, and it's easy to just label it obsession and move on.
Yeah.
Right? But the source material we've been looking at, these excerpts from The Psychology of Devotion, they really make you stop and think.
Right.
Our mission here is to sort of unpack the deeper psychological, the social needs driving it all, what's really going on underneath. Why do these attachments get so incredibly strong for some people?
Okay, so where do we start digging? One thing that jumps out right away is how this intense feeling seems so tied up with, well, with who we are, our identity.
Exactly.
The source mentions Russell Belk's idea, the extended self. What's the key there?
Yeah, Belk's extended self. Basically, the core idea is that we start incorporating external things, objects, brands, even people we admire, into our actual sense of self.
So it's more than just liking something.
Oh, much more.
Yeah.
It becomes part of how you define yourself.
Yeah.
Like someone saying, I'm an Apple person or I'm a diehard Swiftie. It's not just a preference anymore.
It's a statement.
It's a statement, yeah.
Yeah.
It helps shape their personal story. And what's interesting is how brands really lean into this, don't they? Think about like limited editions, exclusive access.
Right. It makes you feel part of an in-group.
Exactly. Reinforces that identity. I'm one of the ones who gets this. It's almost like a badge.
So it's not just what you like, it's literally who you are. And the source suggests this is maybe more relevant today. Why is that?
Well, the thinking is, as some of the more traditional anchors for identity, maybe strong religious ties or, tight local communities, as those become less central for some people, our consumer choices, the figures we admire, they kind of step into that gap. They become really significant ways we signal who we are, both to ourselves and, to everyone else.
That makes a lot of sense. You're sort of broadcasting your tribe through your tastes.
Precisely. It helps answer that big question, who am I?
And this links up with our need for community too, right? Social identity theory comes into play here.
Absolutely. Being a fan, whatever that means for you, it gives you this really powerful sense of belonging. Social identity theory tells us that identifying with a group, it gives us meaning, connection. And that shared identity, whether it's rooting for the same team or loving the same artist well, those are powerful psychological rewards. They make you feel part of something bigger.
Okay, now let's shift to something we see constantly, these really intense feelings fans have for celebrities they've, never met. Parasocial relationships, the source calls them.
Yeah, parasocial relationships. It's a concept that's actually been around since the 50s, believe it or not. It describes that kind of one-sided emotional bond. Right. You feel connected to them, but they obviously don't know you. And social media has just poured gasoline on that fire.
Ooh, completely. All the posts, the stories, it feels so intimate.
It creates this really strong illusion of intimacy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like you're getting a peek behind the curtain. Now, of course, how deep these go, how much they impact people, that's still being studied. It varies a lot.
But it feels real, and the source talks about the brain chemistry behind this. That's fascinating.
It really is. What's wild is that our brains, they don't always draw a sharp line between these parasocial bonds and, actual friendships. When you're constantly exposed to someone, their face, their voice, bits of their life, your brain's reward circuits can light up in similar ways.
Like with real friends.
Pretty much. And you even get oxytocin involved. That's the bonding hormone. It helps cement that feeling of attachment, even though logically it's one way.
So when you feel genuinely sad if a celebrity dies or really happy for their success, that's not just you being silly. There's actual neurochemistry involved.
Exactly. The emotional investment, as the source points out, it's got a real neurological basis. It is real on that level.
Okay, changing gears slightly. The deep dive also looks at how this devotion can sometimes feel almost spiritual, like it fills a need for transcendence, especially if someone isn't traditionally religious.
It's a really interesting parallel, isn't it? In a world where, for some, organized religion plays a smaller role, these intense fandoms or brand loyalties can sometimes provide alternative ways to find meaning, ritual, connection.
How so?
Well, think about it. Fans making pilgrimages. Going to Graceland or maybe even visiting Apple Park.
Right.
Collecting memorabilia like their sacred relics.
Yeah.
Participating in these big communal rituals, concerts, product launches.
Yeah, the energy at those things is huge.
Exactly. These activities can give people a profound sense of being connected to something bigger than just themselves.
It's like finding your tribe and your sacred moments within that culture. And the source even says these things can light up the same parts of the brain as religious experiences.
That's right. That feeling of awe, the intense belonging, the shared emotion. It seems to tap into some really fundamental neural pathways. Professor Janice Peck talks about fan communities as sort of secular religions.
Secular religions.
Yeah, with their own kind of moral codes or origin stories, these peak experiences. It captures that feeling quite well.
Okay, so we have identity, belonging, these almost spiritual feelings.
Right.
But what happens in the brain when enthusiasm tips over into something, well, more consuming? The source talks about obsession, reward pathways, dopamine.
Ah, yes, dopamine. This is where it gets really interesting from a neuroscience perspective. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and reward, is absolutely central here.
How does it drive the fan behavior?
The key thing the source highlights is the power of unpredictable rewards.
Unpredictable.
Yeah, like a surprise album drop from your favorite artist.
Right.
Or maybe a celebrity actually replies to your tweet. Or getting your hands on that super limited edition sneaker.
Yeah.
That unpredictability. It's incredibly potent.
It's like playing the lottery, or a slot machine, kind of. You never know when you'll get the hit.
That's a great analogy. It works on a very similar principle to gambling addiction, actually. That variable reward schedule just keeps you hooked, keeps you coming back for more.
Wow.
And fMRI studies, the brain scans, they show that looking at your beloved brand's logo or seeing pictures of your favorite celebrity can activate the same reward centers in the brain that get activated by addictive drugs.
Seriously?
Yeah, which helps explain why for some people it can feel almost compulsive, that drive to consume, to engage.
Okay, the deep dive also brings in this idea of social status. Cultural capital from Pierre Bourdieu. How does that fit into fandom?
Right, Bourdieu's cultural capital. It helps us see how having really deep knowledge or passion about a specific celebrity or brand or a team, how that can actually give you status within that fan group.
So knowing more makes you cooler in the group.
Basically, yeah. Think about the person who knows every single obscure B-side, or the tech fan who can list all the specs off the top of their head. That expertise, that knowledge, it becomes a form of social currency. It gives them authority, respect within that community. Maybe people look to them for opinions, or they get into more exclusive fan circles.
So knowing all the trivia, having the rare merch, it's not just for personal kicks, it affects your standing.
Exactly. It's a way you signal how committed you are, how much you belong. And that can be really socially valuable, within that specific world.
But of course there's a line, isn't there? When does enthusiasm become, well, unhealthy? The source talks about red flags between healthy passion and problematic obsession.
Yes, and it's a really important distinction to make. The source points out several key signs.
Like what?
Well, first, when the devotion starts seriously interfering with other parts of your life, your relationships, your job, just basic daily functioning.
That seems like a big one.
It is. Also, unsustainable spending, racking up debt from merchandise or tickets. Another is when your entire sense of self-worth gets tied up in the celebrity or brand. If they fail, you feel like a failure. Yeah. Then there's impaired reality testing, starting to believe you have some kind of special personal connection with this figure you've never met.
Right.
And finally, when your identity is so fused with the fandom that any criticism feels like a direct personal attack on you.
That defensiveness.
Exactly. When you see those kinds of patterns emerging, the source suggests, quite rightly, that maybe it's time to think about getting some professional support.
Absolutely. When something that should bring joy starts causing distress or dysfunction.
Precisely.
Okay, so finally, the deep dive ends with this really interesting evolutionary take. It suggests our capacity for this kind of fanaticism might actually go way back to our tribal roots.
Yeah, it's a fascinating perspective. The idea is that our ability, our tendency towards intense group devotion might actually stem from our deep history as social creatures.
Oh, so?
Well, think about early human survival. It depended heavily on strong group bonds, loyalty to the tribe, following leaders, rallying around shared symbols. The psychological wiring that made that possible, that deep need to belong, to identify strongly with our group, to commit to something bigger. The source argues that those same ancient mechanisms might be what's getting expressed today.
But instead of a tribe, it's a football team.
Yeah.
Or a pop star.
Or a tech brand, exactly. The focus of the devotion shifts with the culture, but the underlying psychological machinery might be quite ancient.
So our brains are kind of wired for tribalism, and we just find modern tribes?
That's one way to look at it, yeah. From this angle, fanaticism isn't just some modern weirdness. It's potentially the result of these really fundamental human drives for identity, belonging, meaning, even that sense of transcendence playing out in today's world.
So wrapping this all up, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive into fanaticism?
I think the main thing is that it's way more complex than just calling it obsession. It seems really rooted in fundamental human needs.
Yeah.
It helps us build our identity, find community, create meaning, maybe even touch something transcendent. It's woven into our psychology and our social lives in some really deep ways.
That really does reframe it, doesn't it? It makes you think about your own attachments, the things you feel strongly about.
Mm-hmm.
What needs are those connections fulfilling for you? It's maybe worth reflecting. What do our own devotions tell us, not just about the things we like, but maybe about who we really are?